So, Sam Green with AQUA-AID Solutions, here kind of with our team of salespeople. Just wanted to kind of review 2020. I think the industry as a whole, you know, we thought at the beginning that we were going to be taking this kind of on the chin, but to be true about it, I think rounds are up in golf. It's been an outlet for people to be able to escape the COVID pandemic. And as we go into fall, it's mid to late August now, with football not being played in certain areas, the major championships still yet to be played at the end of September and into November with the Masters, hopefully. Golf's going to continue to have an effect, and people are going to want to still play. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we've seen through all the years of experience between us, and kind of some things we've learned through this year as a company. Talk about some strengths we've had with some distribution partners as far as coming through and kind of everybody adapting to get through the pandemic piece. And then finally we're going to finish up with some thoughts about where we need to look about 2021 as we're getting into that EOP fall season, and everybody's rolling their eyes about EOP, but it's just a fact of our business. But we got to make sure that we're thinking far enough ahead, because there is an unknown factor still in this, but yet I think we've all learned from this season up to this point. I think with this fall being still probably heavy with play, we're not really going to have a normal fall recovery per se, so we need to kind of think about that and then make sure we're kind of planning out for 2021 on what we've learned. So,
Sam, I think one of the things is, you know, you look back at 2020, everybody always says, oh, this year, you know, it's different than any other year. And I think overall the years, 2020 by far, from a number of factors, you know, obviously COVID-19, it had, you know, some negatives and several pluses. The negative was obviously the inability to get out into the golf courses early on in the early stages of the pandemic, the availability of labor, the challenge you had with social distancing and managing that structure. And then a positive, there was increased rounds. And that obviously helped on a revenue side in a lot of cases. But it also posed problems with increased wear and traffic, putting greater agronomic, you know, demands and pressures on the golf course. Then we've had, in a lot of cases, it's been the year of either extremely wet or extremely dry. So we've been dealing and having to, our turf managers dealing with the extremes. I think what's really kind of nice with the AQUA-AID Solutions line, because of having the four pillars of, you know, our wetters, our biological with the worm power, the soil solutions with the vertical lineup, and our cultural solutions with the equipment, we've been able to have some type of, so to speak, you know, arrow in the quiver for each one to do, depending upon what needs they have. So, Mark, you want to talk about some things that happen down in your region? We'll go around.
I think most of all what we've seen, you mentioned a dynamic, different year. We've all experienced change. I think all of us as ex-turf grass managers know that nothing ever stays the same, right? So even though this is a totally different scenario, it's still the same thing. It's never the same. And we have to figure out how to adapt to our conditions and what our needs are. And I think what I've enjoyed is in the limited amount of opportunities we've had, it's helping these superintendents and turf managers identify their problems, identify their needs, and then, you know, to try to help them out, help them get through it, help them get to the next thing. And you know, I think our goal at AQUA-AID Solutions is to continue to provide the best solutions and the best products that we can, so that they can be successful no matter what they're faced with. Next year is going to be different, and we're going to have to identify those needs and address those needs, and again, continue to find products and ways to solve their problems. So even though, you know, I know that's what we enjoy the most, is being on the road and being on the courses, and we've still been blessed to have that opportunity, maybe not as much as we would like, and we'll just look forward to the day when some normalcy from that comes back, but I'm sure we'll have another challenge out there that awaits us in the future, and we'll take it on.
I don't know about you guys, but as a tech guy, I probably spent more time in front of a camera than I have in my entire lifetime in the last 4 months. So I think in some instances, our connection with both end users and our distribution and dealer network and partners has gotten stronger because, you know, we haven't had to put in the equity of road time and flying time. That time's been spent in front of a camera or behind a phone talking with everybody. So I think from that standpoint, I've probably talked to more people in the last 4 or 5 months than I typically do because you haven't had to travel somewhere. What has been lost in that, especially with the dynamic of this year, where we started a little wetter and then we got really dry, and I've probably recommended more HS this year than I have in my first 3 years, is you don't get to, like I say to Sam all the time, touch it, feel it, smell it, to help recommend the solution. So we've had to ask the right questions, we've had to get the right answers back. I know at times, although my distribution partners themselves have just hit it out of the park in terms of staying engaged and working with us and our end users, they've probably been frustrated with me at times because I've had to ask a lot more questions than what we typically would, because you can't just go make that visit. If you are making that visit, you're getting your temperature checked, you're wearing a mask, you're trying to communicate on a mask, staying 6 feet apart, riding separate carts. It's just difficult. So in some ways, I think it's been a better year because we've you know, they say when you're backed into a corner, you have to find a solution. And I think our communication has gotten better. I think our distribution partners have gotten better. I think our distribution partners have had the time, as you say, working on the business instead of in the business to learn more about our products and the ways they've worked. So I think there's been a lot of positive that's come out of this. And Sam, to your point, when we get into hopefully a little bit more normalcy in the fall, that they are going to be well equipped to provide end users the solutions to deal with golf, more golf, no football, and the traffic. So.
This year, I think, you know, was a great year. The last 2 years have been extremely wet, I think, across the entire country. This year we saw what I'll call the true extremes and saw the stresses, and some of our competitive products failed. It gave us some opportunities to introduce our chemistries. And I think, you know, some of the patented technologies, the PBS 150, the ORS HS, ORS PS, the Hydra 30 products, the ORS technology itself really kind of shining through and help differentiate us. And there were a lot of folks that really weren't on weather programs, to speak, or really what you call a water management program. So they started a little behind the ball, but I think, you know, gave some insight, and you guys getting planning as they're putting together budgeting and get out front of when they start the 2021 season. Now, I know Bill and I up north, you know, we think we put our things to bed, and you guys down here in the south, you guys work all the time. We just mail it in. But you got the 12 months, and you know you're starting to set up now for your season going in, starting this fall on the setup. So I think, you know, Bill's point of, you know, asking questions, I think we really were forced to, because we weren't able to go out there and visually see it and touch it and feel it. We had to ask the right questions, which I also think made our, you know, our distributor partners so much stronger, because they had to stop a minute and not just ask for a product. We needed to make sure, particularly because we weren't able to necessarily, you know, be there in person. You know, thank goodness with, you know, FaceTime and pictures and all the, you know, being able to quickly take a photo with your camera or your phone and move it forward. So that part has been I think, very beneficial to our team. I've seen our team grow, and maybe even understanding our products better and being able to understand the limits and maximizing the benefits for our customers.
And I think Mark and I's area down here in the southeast is going to have a new set of challenges from this point moving forward, because we never stopped. This area of the country never shut down, so the play immediately impacted, and our weather pattern down here in the southeast was crazy. We started out in January, February being warm, and then heck, for here in Wilmington, we never hit that magic 140 number where the grass, I mean, it may have been green, but it wasn't growing until like May 21st. So they had all the wear and tear in the traffic at that point in time, with grass trying to come out of dormancy. They've had limited staffs. They've now gone into a summer of extreme heat. Well, we've had rainfall plentiful and storms and stuff to help us out, but a lot of people weren't able to do the mechanical practices that they needed to do to help them alleviate from a long, tough spring. Now, I think it's important that they make sure they're set up right going into fall, whether that be the surfactant and wetting agent application, but probably more importantly is the soil structure itself. I mean, can they do something to help relieve compaction and or help open up the soils and stuff getting into the fall season, knowing that as the sun angle starts changing and things start slowing down, you know, you're still going to have the same traffic peaks more than likely on a lot of these golf courses. And so I think the overall soil health is going to be vital, making sure that there's enough in the gas tank so that when they hit the gas pedal, there's something there next spring for them to help bring them out, because I think they're going to be, you know, kind of under the gun really spring of 2021, maybe more so, and if not more pressure on you than you had in the spring of 2020.
No, it was the same way in the southeast, and what were guys omitting early because they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know how far it was going to go. So they took some things out, didn't do it. Then they got inundated with play, and now we're going into that drought season that we typically will enter into. And so, what's the compounding effect going to be? And they're going to have to try to figure out, you know, a program that can set them up. It's been a while since we've had one of those winters.
Yeah.
And we got to always, you know, we don't want to own the trouble, right? But we got to be prepared for it in this situation, because it can be very difficult if we don't take the right steps as we enter into August and September. I think we'll see a lot of guys try to reactivate around getting a few things done.
I mean, I've always said with Mother Nature, it's either your best friend or your worst enemy. And I think this year, depending on what part of the country, I think everybody's experienced the realm of both sides. You know, you look at in the Ontario province area of Canada, they went through more than, you know, a 50-year drought, and then they finally started getting some relief. But, you know, they were on a lockdown much stricter than we were in parts of the U.S. And then they entered that drought period, and then when they reopened, they had a ton of play. And then they had the drought, and then they had oppressive heat. And I think our wetters in that area, particularly the PBS 150 and the ORS HS, ORS PS, really helped in that Ontario area show the benefit not only of using surfactants, it also proved a point this year, making sure you had your application out early and that you were being able to utilize when you did come back your water sources and everything else, and, you know, hitting the timely rain so that you got the benefit from it. So I think that was a piece that I think a lot of people learned, and we've talked a little bit about in some of the smaller segments we've done, is making sure that the timeliness of the application to set yourself up for success for the season.
You know, we saw a lot of guys in our area, because you guys stayed open, like you said. We were more like Canada and shut down, so staffs were smaller, and I had some golf courses I visited about 4 weeks ago that only had staff come back 2 weeks prior to that. They just shut the doors. Courses that were fortunate enough to cut back to maybe 4 or 6 people, when they did get open again, they saw the inverse of what you guys saw, because they didn't have play on the course. So they were able to aerate, they were able to do their spring cultural practices and heal and not have that pressure of play and traffic and golf and having to rush. They could do it right. Most courses didn't cut back budget on agronomics. They may have cut on labor, but not inputs to the agronomics. And, you know, in early June, some of the deepest roots that people had seen in years, and it was because the grass could grow and didn't have the stress of the cultural practices and the stress of play. Folks that didn't do cultural practices still the same. Saw some of the deepest roots they've seen in years, because they they didn't have that stress in the spring, and the turf was able to come out. So I know a lot of guys did drone videos in the spring, and we saw a lot of nice golf courses on Twitter that had no car traffic. I mean, they were beautiful. That was the time to photograph your golf course. So.
It had helped, with having a reduced labor force up, in the Northeast and Midwest, where we have reduced temperatures. I mean, in the Pittsburgh market, we had 12 days of frost, and I don't even like frost, hard frost, in the month of May. So Mother Nature was being a regulator for us of holding things back that helped, keep the golf courses definitely under control. So I just, when we were talking here, I really kind of forgot about that. And, May's not too far removed from August, so either I want to block it out or I'm having a senior moment, or in my case, maybe a little bit of both. But I think as we look at planning for, 2021, finishing up 2020, I think, being able to go out, aerify, relieve the soils, because there's no doubt that there's compaction out there. And, I see, in talking to my area, anywhere I go out and sticking a pentrometer in the ground, or, just a soil probe, how hard those grounds, those traffic areas are, access, egress areas off of greens and tees and into cart paths, and, looking at doing, some of the shockwave, a number of folks with that, being able to still get a cultural practice with minimal disruption to the surface and having a lasting benefit. There's been a lot of, the term that gets kicked around, there's a lot of dinged up turf out there. So seen a lot, particularly in the northern tier of the country, a lot of seeding going on with the Laredo, and giving an opportunity for some of the products like our AQM, guys bouncing, getting there, looking at their calcium levels, maybe throwing out some vertical, that whole 9 yards, and continuing the worm power. I think, this whole holistic approach of making sure that we have a healthier root zone, we take care of that. That's really a strong foundation, for what's up on top.
I think the biggest thing too is I think that golf courses and golf clubs around the country, a lot of times the clubs have short memories, or they think of certain departments as kind of being the leading edge. But I think one thing's for sure after 2020 is that every golf course out there is going to really understand the value of the golf course itself, the play that's coming through that golf course, and that how that greens department is, very, very critical in what's taking place as the club as a whole. Not necessarily where in the past they may have looked at banquets or weddings or something like that, but I think a lot of clubs have kind of woken up and seen that, hey, you know what, we need to rethink this piece. So, I suggest to every superintendent out there that when it is budget time and that you're turning in your numbers for 2021, it's okay to point yourself or pat yourself on the back with you and your staff on what's been done. Because, really without the golf course and without play, there'd be no club at all. And that goes from the highest of high clubs to the lowest of low clubs. So I think that piece can't be forgotten going from 2020 forward in everyone's agronomic programs and the way they're thinking. I mean, the importance of the course itself, I think, has really been realized by golf clubs.
Let's talk a little about sports turf. Just here recently, we're hearing, different, divisions of collegiate football are canceling or not canceling. And the importance, a lot of these schools, parks, municipalities, professional level. And I remember back years ago, David Fry, was one of the founders with SDMA and was the turf manager for the old municipal stadium there in Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns and Indians played at the same venue, and talked about what's the importance of that, that whether it's an acre and a half or 2.5 acres, of turf. And I think he summed it up best. He says, well, take a look around you. All the seats point in. So that's the focus. And that's, just like the athletes that continue to have to train, even though they may be playing, that playing surface needs to be maintained. Luckily, they can do some of the inputs that may not be being counteracted if they're not playing on it. But, there's going to come a time if those sports are not being played, but someone's gonna turn a switch on and say, let's go at it, and they can't play catch-up. They're gonna have to make sure that, things are being maintained throughout. And I think if they can get ahead of it, I think they'll be better off come, whether it's playing sports this fall or, in early 2021.
I think the sports turf managers have had an extremely difficult position because when everything hit in the spring, if you look about where we were, and let's talk about the sports that are played outside. If you're looking, number one, at Major League Baseball and all the minor league teams that were behind it, they were at that point where they were getting ready to start the season and everything stopped. And, not knowing where and when this was going to kind of, at the beginning lead to. And then, the minor league clubs and the major league clubs were kind of being told, maintain, but, here we are 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And then they finally were able to put the package together. Or, I think MLS did a great job with the way they came back and put the thing together down in Orlando there at the Disney Sports Complex. To Jared Minnick's credit, I think he did a good job of helping that facility and gaining the benefit of the natural grass and being able to play that many games down there and finish up and be strong, with a strong advocacy for natural grass playing fields too. So I think the whole piece from Major League Baseball now being back playing, they never missed a beat. I mean, you watch on TV, I'm sure it's just as weird for the sports manager as it is for the player to be sitting there watching this game go on, nobody with a cardboard cutout inside the stadium, right? So, and here we are, hopefully the NFL is going to come on board and everything else. So, I think all turf management people, the turf industry as a whole, while we were all going through an unsure period of time, I think the cream's kind of risen to the top. And whereas the golf industry's tackled things in their way, and the sports turf industry's tackled things in their way, let's even talk about most sod producers that I know of in the southeast and even in the northeast. They're still done a bang-up job this year. They're still getting sod out the door, right? The housing market still fared pretty well. I think interest rates being low, sod production going out, and I think the new varieties too. Tahoma 31's caught a lot of publicity here this summer with being installed in different spots. The Tiff Tough from a water saving standpoint, and then the guys using the fescues and the Rise and the Blues up north, and just the one thing about it, when the pandemic started, the most crowded store I think in the country was either Home Depot, Lowe's, some Ace Hardware. Everybody was wanting to do something, right? I'd say the residual property value in the United States for each individual homeowner probably went up because everybody was wanting to do stuff outside, and it all revolved around turf, landscape. So I think it was a positive for our business to come out of this. Kind of showed the importance of everything.
I had a lot of sports turf managers in our market that took the opportunity to do things that they normally might not have done. And they looked for some of these forward-thinking ideas, i.e. some phrase mowing and linear decompaction with the shock wave. And they said, you know what, like you said, the light switch is going to flip on at some point. And we can't say, oh my gosh, we have to be ready for it. Limited staff, same old song and dance. Finding the employees is the hardest part. And, university levels, high school levels, other levels were cutting back. And the single managers with the few people they had were still getting it done and finding creative ways to take care of their facility and have it ready when the days came.
Look what's going on, and Bill Brown by far is, he's forgotten more about IT and technology than I'll ever learn. And, look what's happened, over this time. We're talking about the communication, but the education and dissemination of information, and kudos to our university folks. They assembled and they were weekly. I know Ohio State University, Michigan State, they're putting out weekly touches. There's forums for you able to go and get updates in small bites, and getting that information in front of folks, even though not able to do the typical extension service. Of course, as we see week after week, I call it another one falls, some of our trade show travels and the reductions either being totally eliminated or, taking the creativity and putting together virtual trade shows. And I think that's uncharted, market for our territory or for our markets in our industry, of either being an exhibitor at one, a participant, and viewing it. So I think all of us are going to have to work together and definitely provide open, frank, and what I'll call timely feedback, so that we as a industry can grow.
So guys, I think for everybody from the AQUA-AID Solutions team, we wish everybody the best for the remainder of 2020. I think we need to be forward thinking. I've said all along that to me, every time it gets to be January and another year down, I think of it as 365 different opportunities. And I think that's what we can look at as we can grow from what we've learned. If you go through the tough times, you're going to get stronger. We're all here to help you make decisions. If you have any questions or anything, we got great distribution partners throughout the U.S. and the world, and we're open to help. And we look forward to seeing everyone in person in 2021.